which I should have said, is welcome to everyone. Thank you for coming. Particularly thank you to everyone who's come from all corners of the UK this year. We've got people not only from Wales, England and Scotland, we've also got Ireland as well this year. So we're represented very well that way. We've got special guests, of course, from Arizona again. We have our 2 ambassadors from Mesa and who've been working with us. I mean, I know most of you will know them. They've been working with us for a number of years now, and we're running our sister organisations on either side of the Atlantic. Also, for the first time this year, we've got Susan and Brian Churchill from the Wings of Flight Foundation in Mesa. So talk to all these people while you can. They're all here. Make sure that you catch up with them. But the most important people who are here today, of course, are Len Worsdell, Roy Broadley, both from course 27, and we're also going to have Ted Pick, who's course 25, on the screen later. He's joining us on Zoom from his home. We have to remember that all these gentlemen are now, I think the youngest, are you 98 or 99? You're 98. So Len is the baby of our group at 98, and they go up to 102. So an extraordinary group of men. Again, make sure you talk to Roy and Len. We will be bringing them up to the front and they will be doing a lot of talking to us as well. But make sure you catch up with them too, because this is a rare opportunity to actually speak to them in person. So I think that's all I'm going to say at the moment. The first thing we're going to do, which is quite interesting, rather than just have an introduction from me, we've got... have I... my programme, because I've put it away. Is Liam going to introduce it? Sorry, it is. The next, what I'm going to do, we're very fortunate to have Liam Shaw with us, who is the head of visitor experience here at the Imperial War Museum. And Liam is very, very knowledgeable about all of the exhibits in this museum, so if you want to know anything, this is your man to speak to. And he's just going to introduce you with a few words this morning, and then we're going to move on to an introduction from somebody else. That'll be quite different. So I'm going to hand you over to Liam now.
Shall I come over there? I'll come over there. There we are. I'll just shout very loudly. If I get a microphone, I'll start doing karaoke. We don't want that. Very good morning to everybody. Thank you for the introduction. I will keep it nice and brief for you, because I think you are running a few minutes late, so I'm sure you want to get into coffee and biscuits, if nothing else. It's an absolute honour to be here, and in the presence of some distinguished guests as well is always a fantastic thing, and one of the many reasons that I love working at the museum. And I've been involved with this fantastic place off and on for around about 20 years now, and head of visitor experience, I'll take it, but I'm not quite. I'm probably maybe at Duxford, but certainly not within the whole organisation. But I'll take it, and I'll tell my boss, and I'll get a pay rise. So thank you very much. I'll say, just give you a very, very brief introduction to our fantastic historic site here, and we'll try and tie it in a little bit with some of the history and other bits that obviously concern you directly. So Duxford itself, from where we are right now, we're kind of on the eastern edge of what was Duxford Airfield. The old airfield actually did stretch across what is now the M11, and a number of years ago they built the road and shortened our runway. But Duxford itself was built towards the end of the First World War, and it actually opened in 1917. At the point when the RAF hadn't been formed, it was still very much the Royal Flying Corps at the time. And Duxford was built as a training station, somewhere that pilots would be prepared before going on to the Western Front. And with your connection to the US, our connection to the US began at that point as well, as some of the very early American aviators actually came here to acclimatise before being dispatched to the Western Front. So we had quite a good connection from the early days, both British and American airmen working sort of hand in hand, side by side here at Duxford. Now, on our site, from what we call Hangar 3 now, which is the 1917 Belfast Truss hangar, there's 3 of those, 3, 4 and 5. they form the core of our historic site. Those buildings were built in 1917 and are as old as Duxford itself. The building we're in right now, in fact the bit we're in at the very front here, is much more modern than that, opened in about 2005, so a lot more modern at this end. But Duxford's been developed over its entire history. At the end of the First World War, we hadn't had any combat squadrons, they had been training squadrons, and as I say, some of those found their way out to France. But in the period after the First World War, Duxford just about clung on to its survival. Down the road is an airfield called Falmere, and Falmere at the time in 1970 was as big as Duxford. But at the end of the First World War, that was reduced back to agriculture, and Duxford just about clung on as an airfield, thanks to our proximity to Cambridge and our use for university pilots and such things. Between that period, a lot of training was undertaken, but there were some combat squadrons here as well. I won't go into too much detail, but there was one particularly notorious squadron, number 19, who often seemed to get brand new aeroplanes delivered to them. The RAF, between the wars, generally relied on biplane aircraft, and at one point that squadron was given the Gloucester Gauntlet, at the time the RAF's most advanced biplane aircraft. Now it's quite interesting that they were given that aeroplane because they actually had just gone through a period known as the mess bill scandal, whereby they'd spent so much money in the bar, in the officers' mess and otherwise, that their monthly salaries were not covering it, and they were actually refused any more drink until they'd caught up their bar tab, basically. But despite that, they were still given this brand new aeroplane, the Gloucester Gauntlet. And it was voiced to be the aeroplane, for the first time, a fighter aircraft that had the endurance to fly from London to Edinburgh without landing. So, for its day, pretty extensive range that aeroplane had. But on one of their very early training sorties, when the RAF had a total of 6 frontline Gauntlet aircraft, they took off on a training exercise. Fog rolled in, they couldn't see their airfield. Bearing in mind this aeroplane could stay up in the air for a number of hours, what did these pilots do? They pointed the aircraft out to sea and they bailed out. Their aeroplanes disappeared, and in one fell swoop the RAF lost their entire frontline strength of Gloucester Gauntlets. When they landed, understandably they were tipped off slightly, but so was their CO, so much so that he pointed out to them these aeroplanes had extensive range. They should have beetled around for a little while and maybe found a hole in the clouds and come down. And he was so upset with them that he had them paint in giant letters, which are still there to this day on the wall of Hangar 4, Gauntlet Endurance, and then the amount of time that that aeroplane could stay in the sky, 3 hours 57 minutes. So if you get to Hangar 4, there's evidence of that there. But despite them drinking a lot and crashing lots of aeroplanes, on the 4th of August 1938, they gained quite a lot of fame, in that they become the first RAF squadron to be given the Spitfire. And it's here at Duxford that the Spitfire is introduced into service, and we've spoken briefly about Spitfires today because we've got a lot here. We're very lucky. I think in many ways we're the home of the Spitfire still to this day, and probably at some point we're going to get interrupted because there are some passenger Spitfires, 2-seat trainer aircraft, that are due to be doing some passenger flights, and they will be starting just outside here. So you might hear some Merlin engines taking them. The first one was due to be 11, then 12, then 2, then 4. Read into that, add about 20 minutes because they're usually late. You know, they have to you know, build up the tension, you know. Absolutely. So you should get a good view from the balcony because they'll do a lot of their power checks just outside of the airfield. So you will get disturbed a little bit. So Duxford brings the Spitfire into service and then becomes a key station of number 12 group, in fact a sector station, during the Battle of Britain. During the Battle of Britain, most of the combat is happening a little bit further south from here, just over the bump from North Weald downwards. But Duxford plays a bit of an infamous role. Douglas Bader is based in and out of here at one point, as well as at Cotteshall down the road, and comes up with the idea of the big wing. This idea of flying 3 and eventually 5 squadrons together to combat the Germans. Unfortunately, it's a very unwieldy squadron. It takes a lot of time to put it up in the air, and they're not necessarily as effective as possibly the history books would let you believe. One thing that I can say with certainty, though, is they had a big impact on morale. 15th of September 1940, which is a day we now look at as the Battle of Britain Day. On that particular day, the Germans were attacking London. In the morning, they sent in a bomber force to attack London, and their pilots had been told that the RAF was down to its last 50 aircraft. They fly in towards London, relatively clear weather, nice warm day for mid-September, and as they come in, they're met by RAF squadrons from the minute they cross the coast. They're fought all the way to London by the RAF's last 50 fighters. As they approach London, they think, well, we've seen off those last 50 fighters, the last bit will be easy. And emerging out of the haze to the north is another 50 fighters, basically formed of the Duxford wing, meeting them on the way in. What that must have made them think at that moment, I have no idea, but certainly probably made them think their intelligence wasn't quite right. Some of those pilots would make it home and would fly again in the afternoon's mission. Once again, they think, well, okay, there were 50 this morning, maybe there were a few more than that, but we shot a lot down. This afternoon will be a lot easier. Exact repeat of what happened in the morning. They're harried all the way from the coast to London, and once again the Duxford big wing attack them over London. Now, I don't think they shoot down a huge amount of aircraft, but the heart of the German pilots at that point must have dropped a few notches. And in fact, it's only 2 days later that Hitler postpones the potential invasion of Britain indefinitely. So it was a very significant day, and I would like to say Duxford had a bit of a part to play in that as well. After the Battle of Britain, aeroplanes remain a big part of Duxford. We have various fighter squadrons here, but we also have the Air Fighting Development Unit and the Enemy Aircraft Flight, where they trial new and captured aeroplanes and prepare them for combat service. Aircraft like the Hawker Typhoon get trialled here and used operationally from Duxford. But it's shortly after that that Duxford is handed over and becomes base 357 of the United States Army Air Force, and shortly after that welcomes the 78th Fighter Group with their P-47 Thunderbolts, who make this home from that point onwards. They get replaced with P-51 Mustangs around about August, September of 1944, so just after D-Day, and it's the Americans who see out the Second World War here at Duxford. And some of the buildings on site have some American influence. The control tower was finished during their stay here as well. At the end of the Second World War, the Americans depart and the British move back in. Appropriately enough, the first RAF aircraft to return is a Spitfire, and then shortly after we start seeing the arrival of the early war jets. We get examples of the Meteor, the Hunter and the Javelin over the years that Duxford's operational. The runway is extended, we have tarmac laid, and over the period the site develops to become a useful frontline station. But towards the early 1960s, Duxford's a bit too far from the coast to be useful, and as a result it goes into a period known as care and maintenance. It's the second time Duxford's gone into care and maintenance, and in RAF terminology it essentially means we don't care and we're not going to look after it. So what that basically means is everyone moves out, and unfortunately things like windows get broken and things like that. The site becomes a little bit derelict, and possibly would have stayed that way had the Imperial War Museum not started to look at using it as a large object store, holding some of the things that didn't fit in our other branches. And also, quite importantly, in 1968, a film company turned up. That film company would recreate the events of the Battle of Britain in the film Battle of Britain. And Duxford was one of the key and probably the biggest UK-based locations for that film. A lot of the aircraft based operated from here, and there's a couple of very famous scenes in it which you can see were shot at Duxford. One of which is Susanna York, Kenneth Moore, where he's telling her off for using her gas mask case as a handbag, and she, the female contingent, the WAFs on site, should not be using the men's air raid trenches when the air raid siren goes off and the bombs start landing. Those bombs start landing roughly where the American Air Museum Land Warfare Hall are today, at the far end of the site, and needless to say they all run into a trench which was actually dug by our control tower. That scene ends with a hangar being blown up. Now that particular hangar, it's not here anymore, they blew it up. It's between what is now hangars 3 and hangar 4. It was actually only half as big as the ones that were there, and their first pass at blowing it up wasn't very successful. You see it on the film, the door's shake, there's a bit of dust. The second one, far more spectacular. They put in barrels of fuel, a few more explosives, and they pushed the plunger. And I do have to say that for a film that includes Michael Caine, on that occasion they were supposed to only blow the London. But there we are. That hangar is a big loss to us because we could fill it with a lot more aeroplanes if we had it today. But the big advantage is that as a result of that loss, the site became a listed site, a conservation area, meaning that any further demolition or destruction could not happen. So really, with the RAF moving out and the film happening, the next stage in its life is with the Imperial War Museum, and we go through a period where the collection grows, it starts to open on certain days, and where are we today? Saturday, literally a week today, saw the very, very first Duxford Air Show 50 years ago next Saturday, and we're commemorating that with a flying day here next Saturday as well. So Duxford and air shows began at that point, and I won't bore you with the continued history of the Imperial War Museum here at Duxford, but we've continued to develop the site, build new buildings, bring in new exhibits, and we've got what we have today, which is an active airfield and a museum, and most importantly it's a museum that has a lot of partners. And some of those partners are the likes of which you're going to see aeroplanes potentially flying today, Spitfires, Tiger Moths and the like. And also very importantly for us, and probably for your visit today as well, we have a very good partnership with the modern day United States Air Force. Now the big advantage of that is that they have donated and loaned us a number of aircraft which are on show in the American Air Museum, which is the big glass fronted building at the far end of the site. And we've got aircraft in there you literally won't find outside of America. We have examples of a U-2 spy plane, an SR-71 Blackbird, a B-29 and a B-52 bomber, amongst other things. So very, very important. But it also means that we have got an example of both a Boeing Stearman and a North American Harvard in there. And if you go for a wander later on today, you may find a number of other Harvards dotted around the site, which are privately owned, one of which, in Canadian markings, is just outside the window. As you said, I put that there especially for you. Nothing to do with me whatsoever. No, I can't take the praise for that. But as I say, what you will see as you go around a little bit later, I think after 4 o'clock, you've got some time, there's a lot of aircraft here, and a lot of the ones that are capable still of flying to this day are privately owned. And as I say, through the course of a nice day like today, we might see some of those in the sky. So all I will say is I'm going to come back, I think, just a little bit before 4 o'clock. So if you've got any questions about what you might want to see, a bit of orientation, I will do that a little bit later once you've had a fantastic day. I will also say, if you do want to move around the site beforehand or at that point onwards, we have a white minibus that moves around all day. We call it a mobility assistance vehicle. It's very glamorous. Essentially what it is a minibus with some seats and a wheelchair ramp. And if you need to go, for example, to the American Air Museum and you want to save your legs or save the tread on the wheelchair, hail it down and we can use that to get you to the other end of the site. Otherwise, I will wish you a very enjoyable day. I will hope you're not disturbed too much by the occasional crackling of a Merlin engine outside. And as I say, I'll try and pop back a couple of times, and if there's any questions, have you got a lunch break planned?
Yeah, it's 12:30.
12:30. I'll try and come back around there. I won't come in, I don't want to disturb you, but I'll wait outside. And if you've got any questions or anything I can help with, point in my direction and I'll do my very, very best to help you out as your day goes on. And thank you very much to our esteemed gentlemen who have joined us today. Have a lovely day. Thank you very much.